What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we are continuing our ReAnimator retrospective. And who better to join me than my past guest, Dave Horrocks. You're back and reanimating. How you finding it? How you finding it so far, and how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, Scott. It's great to be back and talk a little bit more about this ReAnimator universe that we have here. Do have to say, through this and the VHS Strikes Back, I just seem to have watched a lot of very questionable movies of this last month. A lot of very questionable, saucy movies, I have to say. And I'm just glad. I was just saying this literally on my last recording on the VHS podcast, but I sometimes have to draw the curtains, because when you walk up my drive, you can see the TV, from front door, and like some of them have just done Hard Ticket to Hawaii, which is basically, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's just a softcore porn film, but with 80s action. It's just ridiculous, and because I was watching it in the day, I was just like, I'm going to have to draw the curtains here, just in case Mr. Amazon turns up and just decides to leave the packages outside.
Yeah. See, so that's what you do. Fair enough.
Yeah. I'm podcasting.
Yeah. This is important. These films are important. Talk about that. Yeah. So what we are going to continue in our ReAnimator retrospective. There are only 3 ReAnimator films. And in the last episode, we covered H.P. Lovecraft's The ReAnimator, Bride of ReAnimator, and then today we are going to be covering Beyond ReAnimator, the 3rd entry in the series. But I like even numbers. We're not going to mess around, so I thought, sticking with Jeffrey Combs and the H.P. Lovecraft sort of theme, we were also going to be talking about From Beyond, from 1986, which has a similar cast. It's got Jeffrey Combs, it's got Barbara Crampton, and it's obviously based on another Lovecraft story, and it's directed by Stuart Gordon, who directed ReAnimator. So we're sort of keeping it in the house, keeping it in the sort of the family, so it sort of fits into that, as you said, sort of universe. But we'll get there. We will do Beyond ReAnimator first, and then we'll move on to From Beyond. So this is sort of like, this is one step beyond. For those that haven't seen any of these films, you can, I think, believe. Well, where did you watch them, Dave? Just out of curiosity.
Dodgily. Amazon.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Amazon Prime.
Yeah, there you go. You can actually get one. Yeah. They are available through different sort of both legit and unlegit means. I actually watched. I have the Beyond ReAnimator Arrow Blu-ray, which I've got here. So
very nice.
I'll be using that for reference, which is quite cool. Sort of finishes off my trilogy of ReAnimator films. And then From Beyond, I did actually watch on Prime. So we had that. So they're available most places. These are 2 very different films. I think as by the time you've got to the 3rd film in a franchise, as you usually know, there's budgets are reducing and stories are getting a little bit more, I won't say desperate, but there's some cliches and stuff going on in this film. But yes, Beyond ReAnimator, you mentioned this before. One of the things we mentioned actually from ReAnimator to Bride of ReAnimator is the canon's the continuity's a little skewed. And this film most definitely continues in that vein. At the end of Bride of ReAnimator, Herbert West is pulled into the crypt to which their basement laboratory sort of neighbors, and he's attacked by a lot of the sort of reanimated creatures that he has created. the assumption is he's dead. However, according to from Beyond ReAnimator, now I'm not sure if this is supposed to be the same night or something else, but there is another instance where a reanimated corpse breaks into a family home and kills a young teenage, sort of teenage girl, and watching on is her young brother. And then in the process, Herbert West is arrested and sent to jail, and the young boy holds the vial or the syringe of the reanimating fluid, and it just jumps to 13 years later. So you've gone from, because it was made in 2003, it's even from 1990 to 2003, and then it's there that whilst West is in prison, he's been doing further experiments, has found another thing, sort of neutroplasma or neuroplasma, some sort of...
Isn't it NCP or something like that? They made up a little acronym for it.
Yeah. And this is the sort of the missing component. So previously, all of his reanimated creatures have been psychotic. They've come back in a rage, mindless sort of creatures. This new creation, this new sort of component, is what gives them back their mind. And as usual, the experiments start, and eventually there is a riot in the prison, and things go haywire, involving a shadow fight between a rat and a penis. And we shall talk about that.
So great.
So that is Beyond ReAnimator. So first and foremost, let's go back to the beginning. So overall thoughts, really, before we really get into the nitty gritty. Like, you've watched this now, so you've watched all three of them, but like Beyond ReAnimator, general thoughts.
I think there's very little consistency, as you said, with the whole trilogy. This one does feel very different, this last one, from the first two, but we sort of take a 5-year leap from the first to the second, so 85 to 90, and then, like you say, a 13-year gap. So the whole thing spans 20 years. So I don't know if there's many trilogies that span quite that long. So it's basically Coombs, isn't it? He's the thing, and the glowy green reanimating, or the reagents as they call it. So that is the thing that's consistent, and I think they also do try and take chances. I think I'm not going to disagree about the plot becomes or the stories become a bit more loose as they try more kind of wacky things. But actually, if I'm to believe it, they spent $3 million on this. Now, the first one obviously was not adjusting for inflation or anything. The first one was $2 million. So in relative terms, it probably was more expensive, but still a fair chunk of change. And I do think they were experimenting with some of those very early 2000s CGI effects, weren't they? It's almost like X-Men, some of it, when they putting the glowy, sparkly stuff into people, you see it sort of traveling through the brain and what have you. But no, I kind of enjoyed it, but I think I'm less forgiving for some of the wrongness of it, particularly in like the whole franchise's approach to women and female characters. You can almost sort of semi-write some of the stuff off in the first one because it's like, it's the 80s, you can't hold it to the same standard. But I'm looking at this last one, it's 2003, and they have, derivative is probably the word that I would choose to use. They've just taken the first one, and they've done that thing where they're like, they go to a focus group. It's like, what are the top 5 things you like about this franchise? Right. Basically, there is your starting place for a script, And so I wouldn't say I didn't enjoy it, but there was nothing as innovative or fresh, if you like, that came out from that first one. And even the second one, I felt, push the boundaries a bit. They made these weird monsters and what have you. But this one was just a little bit of a cash grab, I think.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because this one was weirdly funded. It's sort of like 50-50 US Spanish production.
Yeah.
So, clearly, I don't know. Like you said, there may be an audience for this in Spain. Don't know why. Not sure why that's come from. and it shows because there's obviously there's several sort of key Spanish actors in this. The warden, the one of the main guards, and the nurse, all Spanish actors, and it's fine. The problem it works. It works seamlessly, pretty seamlessly. But you're right about sort of like, because they weren't quite fine the first one. You know, they have, you know, you have like a talking head that attempts to rape a woman, and sort of like, you know, so you've got, it goes pretty far in that first one. And then they managed to push it further with the wackiness and sort of like the effects in the second one. I mean, we obviously talked about like the bride when she sort of disassembles at the end, and some of the effects. And then you have again that the same head comes back with bat wings attached to it now to sort of like fly around. So you've got, all right, we've gone crazy with this. And you're right. So there's a lot of stuff in this that it sort of seems to have reached its barrier. You know, that thing of like, where in some, but there are still things in this, and where it tries to push that wackiness. And we'll get into a couple of them. And yeah, because I think they sort of cross a line into, because everything before has been wacky, but sort of kept within that, it's horror comedy. But they sort of like swap places in parts in this film where it's definitely like leading into the comedy more. However, there's still some good practical, some of the practical effects in this are still really good. And you find out what the reagent does to a living body at the end of this as well, and I like that effect, especially when it comes sort of like the messed up body sort of steps up and asks for more. Like,
it?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you know, it does. It definitely sort of has that sort of thing. But to me as well, just watching this feels like, you say a cash grab, and I can definitely see that. It feels like a TV movie. You know, where the other ones had. The first one was a theatrical release. I'm not sure if the second was a theatrical release, but it still had that gloss, that Hollywood shine, or you know, that gloss you sort of get from a sort of quality production. This doesn't quite have that. It feels more like it was made for like a digital TV channel, like a sci-fi movie almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it must have been a funny time around 2003 to shoot film. So you had Phantom Menace coming out in 1999, didn't you? And so everyone was kind of moving towards digital, and you know, shooting on film that's going to be used in movies, obviously much more expensive than TV film. But I think this looks like they probably did shoot it on TV film.
Yeah, it looks like it.
It did make me consider, you know, it must have been a weird time for, you've got your early adopters probably moving to digital, and then other people kind of slowly catching them up, and everyone shoots digital now, don't they? But I imagine it took a few years to properly transition across.
Yeah, and I think that it shows. And you know, it's just one of those sort of slight qualities. It's a niggle more than anything. It sort of slightly shows. But also, one of the things that sort of clearly shows in this is before, like you had. Now, not to say that any of the acting in any of these films has been sort of like Oscar worthy, you know, but it's been of a piece. Like, you know, Jeffrey Combs sort of like is aiming for a certain kind of tone, and they've sort of hit it. Even the guy who plays Dad, and obviously Barbara Crampton, the first one. And you know, again, the sort of the actors that came back that were in for the second one. But this third one, again, like the guy who plays the warden seems to get it. You know, like I think he sort of gets it, and he's like, oh, okay. And the others all feel very sort of soap opera.
Yeah, he's like a Spanish chuckle brother, isn't he?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what a brother would be in Spanish, but like a chuckle senor.
Yeah. No, he's definitely hamming it up completely. Yeah. And like you say, I think a sci-fi movie absolutely nails it, to be honest. I was surprised when I saw this was 3 million, to be honest. Yeah. I was like, wow, where's the money gone?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those weird ones, because you do watching it, knowing that 3 million was spent on this, you know, see, I don't think Jeffrey Combs is you know, has enough sway to be sort of like demanding multi-million dollar paycheck, but he is the key part of this.
Yeah.
But he has made some terrible films, so it's not like I don't think he was, turning lots of things down. So I'm assuming it's a good paycheck. But one of the things, isn't it, there's lots of blood in this. There's lots of sort of special effects. But the other thing is the set itself. Although I said it looks like a TV, the one thing is that jail. It feels like a legit, like that's not like when you get sort of like studio sets where the walls look a little wobble, stuff like
wobbling as you walk along the floor.
yeah. Don't step on that board because the third door will pop open. No, this felt like almost like they were filming in a prison. Like it had I felt like the geography. You felt sort of like the size and scale of it. So that was something I was quite impressed with. Was the set. So I wonder how much money was actually spent on either refurbing or renting or doing something with this set, which
It could have been something like that. I mean, I guess I just assumed they had some abandoned prison in Spain somewhere and then just shot it on location. But if they did actually build that all out, yeah, that would have cost quite a few.
I can't believe they built all of it. You're right. I think some of it must be on location, but somewhere like the doctor's office with the table, I think some other bits. I think the room with like the electric chair and there's clearly some bits I think must have been built as sets somewhere. But yeah, I think the sort of the what do they call it? Sort of the stage setting and sort of like the stage decoration and stuff and everything is really good. But yeah, I do wonder sometimes when you see these budgets, it's like go back and like when you sort of read about Canon film, and you read about their sort of financial, the budgetary sort of like this film costs 8 million to make, but you start to add it up and you're like, I can only really account for 3, so that's 5 million. Sort of can't seem to have gone somewhere. So yeah, I can imagine there were some fees to be paid along the way. But yeah, it looked the sets look good, but unfortunately it still looks cheap.
Yeah.
But the story in and of itself is almost, I say, it's a sort of a repeat of the first one, isn't it? Sort of West is in prison, and this doctor who's now grown up is got himself placed in the prison so that he can work with Herbert West to bring people back from the dead. He wants to do it to sort of like to save lives, and he has like a noble cause, much like Dan. And there's a drop line where you find out that Dan, his past partner, actually sort of turned state's evidence. And actually,
I missed that bit.
Yeah, there's a moment after they bring back the first, the guy who has a heart attack. The prisoner has a heart attack, and they bring him back to life. And there's that whole
bald guy,
At that point, as West is sort of taken back to his cell, he actually says to the doctor, he says, yeah, my last partner turned state's evidence on me. I have higher hopes for you.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so that's cool. That's quite a nice little nugget as to why where Dan is now.
Yeah, that is a good little line that addresses the fact that, I mean, Dr. Phillips is basically Dan. He's a surrogate for Dan, isn't he? But it's nice that they threw in. I missed that line, but I do like that they addressed it there.
Yeah, so that was the other thing. Actually, his name is Dr. Phillips. His name is Howard Phillips, and obviously it's Howard Phillips Lovecraft. So that was a nice little nod. But yeah, he comes in, and his justification though. His justification, because I want to talk about the opening scene. Like we've actually talked, we're talking sort of generally, but I want to talk about some specific scenes. His motivation is that 13 years ago, so 1990, he witnessed his sister being killed. Now, he and his friend are they're sat in a tent in a garden telling ghost stories, and he appears to have they are talking about, I believe, the legend of Herbert West. They're talking about the reanimation of body parts and stuff. And then they hear a noise and they go into the house, and his sister, this is the weird bit, it's his sister, and she's in sort of like negligee kind of things. And she sort of like, he tries to like crawl under her legs, like she's tickling him or something. And he goes under her leg, like his head is trapped between her thighs. And I was instantly weirded out. I'm like, I don't know this. This is too weird. It's too weird.
I thought that was the first bit though, where I'm just thinking, okay, the whole kind of rapiness to the whole franchise is
Yeah.
not just something that's in the 80s and 1990. They've brought that along because she almost like puts him in between her legs. He doesn't like try and crawl under or something. She basically
No.
grabs him and just shoves him there. It's like,
It was, yeah, it's
what is
almost
going on here?
Well, it was almost like the start of like a tombstone. Like I thought she was going to like pull him up, and then that was like, it was going to be like an Undertaker
Wrestling
moment.
style.
Yeah, yeah. They're all sort of laughing and joking about, and then the sort of like a walking corpse comes in that's lost its lower jaw and its tongue sort of sticking out, and again that looked great. It looks kind of good. It's all practical. It's trying to drink milk. But it grabs her and sort of like smashes her head against the wall, and you sort of throttles her to death. And so he witnesses that, and then he witnesses the creature that's done it, and he sees it get shot to killed again. And that motivates him to want to become a doctor to learn how to bring things back to life.
So convoluted.
Yeah. It really seemed like this bizarre. I'm like, well, how's that motivated you to do that? Like, it seems
surely
like
you would want to kill the guy who did this. Like, that's the first thought.
Well, that was my thought. I thought this whole thing was going to be like a setup for revenge. I thought that Dr. Phillips was going to turn up and then he'd be the one that sort of instigates against West in the prison. But no, it's bizarre. Like,
I felt like this was the way it started was very much post Scream.
Yes,
just the way it started off, and it was kind of creepy, and you get the zombies kind of point of view, sort of as he's walking in, he's looking through the window, and she's in the kitchen and what have you. So I felt it was a bit different to how the previous two started, and like I say, it's not exactly like Scream because you only get it from Drew Barrymore's perspective initially, don't you? But it just felt different, and it felt much more of a tense build up, whereas like especially in the first one you're just grossed out from the start, aren't you? You've got
it's
Dr. Hans
film,
Gruber, his eyes are bulging and everything, and it's a gore fest, whereas I felt up until you see the zombie trying to drink the milk, they played on the tension quite a bit more.
No, I agree with that. That's a good point, because I think you're right. This is a post. Well, it's 2003. So it's a post Scream world they're sort of making this in, and I think there's other films. Obviously, you've had all those sort of return of those slashers, haven't you? Sort of like the meta slashers, the knowing slashers, and it tries to sort of have that. You agree, slightly sort of address that tone at the beginning, and then quickly drops it to move on to being what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, and obviously then they go to the prison. Just as it sort of starts, quick cut. 13 years later, Herbert West is working in prison, and he's now like capturing rats to electrocute them. And it just turns out this is one of the key things of this plot is the rat he kills in this opening scene is the pet of another cellmate. So
yeah,
there's this sort of it's you see it's been convoluted. It's both really simple, but really like the subplots in this are really bizarre and convoluted. Because the whole gist of this film, it's that thing of they've added something at each point, haven't they? So the first one was about bringing the dead back. The second one's sort of like the ability to reanimate independent body parts. Now they're bringing in this electrical component that sort of gives people their brain sort of. It's almost at one point they even call it their soul. It's almost that sort of. It's capturing an essence of that person. And we find out that can be interchanged between things like rats and humans. So they keep adding an element, and it does become slightly convoluted. Just trying to sort of bring all these components together. But so what were your thoughts when it sort of gets into the prison? And firstly, what was your thoughts? You're introduced back to Herbert West. You've got Jeffrey Combs coming back in. How do you find him in this film?
I still think he's the best thing about it. You're drawn to him. I do think he's hamming it up a little bit less than he had done previous. I think he's still playing that kind of Batman villain, but I just found him a little bit down on the scale from before. And like I say, it's quite obvious with Phillips that, you know, I didn't know he was going to be the little kid, but you're like, what is his game here? And when you get the guy, the Nosferatu looking bloke, you know, and he's sort of dying, and then you're like, well, I know where this is going, you know, because there's no real reason to bring him back at all. You know, so I just thought it had the DNA of, you know, the whole Reanimator series. And so even though, like you say, that it takes you a while to stop thinking about the fact that it's a TV movie quality movie, if you like. But yeah, it's still, I definitely think Coombs is the best thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think everyone else sort of like revolves around him, don't they? You sort of get this feeling that he's the Freddy Krueger, he is the Jason, he's the key, he is the Reanimator. But I like the fact that he's still slightly arrogant and sort of gets indignant about things, but he's still a terrible scientist.
Yeah.
Because when he gets the fluid, the reagent, and he's just like, oh, it could have degraded over 13 years. Or not. And straight away, he's just like, I'm not going to test it. I'm just going to inject it straight into this person. And I say, Dr. Phillips is just like, what are you doing? And he tells him, he's like, oh, all right, fair enough. Like, you know, he's not like going to stop him. He just says, we could be found out. And that's it. So, yeah, it sort of kicks off. What I find is that this film, because it brings it, there's a female, there are two sort of female component elements. I don't even call them characters because they sort of, they're there for, there's a nurse who's
paper thin, aren't they?
Yeah, like there's a nurse who appears in the background of a number of scenes, so that when later on she's being chased down and her clothes are ripped off, you're like, oh, I've seen her before. She's been in this film before. Yeah. And then there's a female reporter who is writing an article about reintroducing criminals back into society and sort of things, and ends up talking with the doctor, and it ends up sort of going off and having this love affair with him
out of nowhere.
It literally sort of it's just so, you know, can I drive you home? Yes. And then they're in bed, and like it's sort of like, oh, cool. Wow.
I didn't catch exactly the line. It's a few weeks since I've watched it now, but wasn't he saying like she reminds him of his sister?
Yes, he says that twice actually in the film. In fact, it comes up 3 times because I think it's his name like Sarah or something. I forgot what her name is. But he basically, at 2 points during the film, he acknowledges that she reminds him of his sister, and at the end of it, he calls her by his sister's name.
So
and you are,
wrong.
and I am going like, you've been sleeping with her.
Yeah,
this is all weird. Yeah, but you see, paper thin, you said before, is exactly right. Like the female characters in this are literally there for titillation later in the film. Like, you know, she's got like Chekhov's boobs. Like that's all she's there for. And this reporter character is literally there again to be that sort of she's basically, in comic terms, she becomes fridged. She is it sort of instigates the whole, or was part of the whole thing at the end. However, she also leads to the Titanic fight. You know, she basically bites off the penis that leads to the Titanic fight between, you know, animated penis and rat, which cannot be undersold.
I think, you know, the horror comedy at that point just went out of the window, and it was just pure comedy. I couldn't believe what I was watching with that rat, but almost a good way to finish off the trilogy, really, wasn't it? Just a bit of nonsense, you know. I think the thing is, when the reporter, so Laura, when she turned up on screen, and again, having seen the stuff with his sister at the beginning, like shoving the kid between her legs and stuff, she's absolutely stunning. And she's in the middle of a prison there, all male prison by the looks of it. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is not going to go well.
Yeah, and it doesn't. But it comes back to, and this comes back to, I mean, this one was directed by Brian Usner, who directed the second one as well, Bride of Reanimator. Stuart Gordon directed the first one. And he has that sort of, like, you know, between them, they have this thing of sort of like eroticism, sort of within the horror comedy as well. And so we say about the nurse who, she's literally there, like she gets bitten on the boob, like it's there for like, it's not, but things, it doesn't even work as like titillation. It's not even, it's weirdly sort of like just disconcerting.
It's just violence against women, isn't it, really?
Yeah, basically. And so it's a bit sort of like, all right, I'm not sure if you're going for titillation or comedy, but it's just like, it's falling kind of flat. Like you're just making it a bit icky. But the female reporter, like, we'll get to From Beyond in a minute. But again, like this has a sort of a similar thing where she sort of like takes off her shirt and all of a sudden she's wearing like a bodice, like corset thing. And you're like, hang on, like, what's going on there? And because she's now been reanimated, because she's died, she does actually die. So she there's a fridging moment. She is reanimated and given some of this plasma stuff, but she's given it from the warden. And so she starts to take on the traits of the warden and his evil version, like an evil version and stuff. And so, yeah, it's just trying to keep track of what is actually going on amongst the riot at the end is a bit sort of like, there's a lot going on. Like, there's a lot going on.
It just all gets a bit lock up, really, doesn't it? With the prison riots. And I feel like even from the first one, depending on who the characters are and what you want of them, depends how they react to the reagent as well. So you've got the evil hypnotist doctor, and he's got control of his faculties and everything, whereas everyone else just turns into a rabid monster kind of thing, and you've got the same with the warden here. He turns, he's in control of himself, it seems. He looks like he could have been in From Dusk Till Dawn, actually, the way they've kind of made him up there.
Good Paul, because that's actually exactly what I was thinking. This reminds me of the film, and now you've literally just said, okay, that is exactly where my head was going, but it hadn't quite reached there yet. You're right. You're right, that reagent sort of like, depending on what you want from the character, like they can be reanimated and they either go like rabid animal or they just become a worse version of themselves. It's never quite consistent, which is fine. As you say, plot. They get like plot armor, don't they? Sort of like they don't go crazy because they need to exist for this purpose. But the warden just replaces that sleazy hypnotist doctor. Literally playing the same role as the warden. So yeah, it's all very samey. There's very little in this that I hadn't seen before.
I think the only thing is the design of some of the, let's call them zombies, because in the second one they really went off piece, didn't they? And they had those little like
the hand with the eye
bodies, that are glued together. He glued like an arm and a leg together, and he created these fantastical reanimations, whereas here it's sort of back to the original, but then the warden kind of gets up on his hind legs, bit like a spider kind of thing. You have the guy who had the pet rat, and he's basically got his lower half missing. So they played around with the effects, I think, and created these different monsters, if you like. So I thought that was new, but the same kind of archetypes were all there. The damsel in distress who's got no agency whatsoever, the mad scientist who's got the best of intentions but he's arrogant, so he doesn't ever stop to think whether he should do something. The warden / creepy hypnotist, they're all the same, aren't they? So that's the bit that I think is derivative about this third one.
Yeah, and I think you're right. If you've seen the first two, you've sort of seen you've seen this one. Apart from it's like you say, it's now in a prison. There are some interesting moments. Again, you get some interesting characters that are quite who's he called Speedball, the one who sort of takes the drugs, and he's kind of funny. Like I say, when you see what a reagent does to a living body, that's quite cool. and like you say, the guy who gets torn in half, like with the corpse, the guy who has the rat, when he's just a torso walking down the corridor. Some of the effects are kind of good. They're actually pretty good. So there are things that are fun in it, but it does feel very repetitive. Like it's definitely that sort of like, keeps coming down. But weirdly, this is the first one that, as we get to the ending, sort of this is in the first one, he's attacked by the reanimated corpses in the morgue. So you think he's dead, but they don't. They go into Bride, the reanimator. At the end of Bride, he's attacked by all the creations in the crypt, and so you think he's dead. This is the first one where he actually escapes. And there's no sequel, so it's almost like I think I'd have preferred them to keep that tradition.
Trope.
Yeah, keep up the tradition of actually sort of like that. You think that Herbert West has been killed at the end of each film. I think would be a bit more fun.
I think that's a great call. They've ticked off so many other boxes to make sure that they've done certain things in each movie, and that isn't one. And maybe it's one of those things where in the writers' room they're just thinking, you know what, we are sick of trying to address how he's escaped.
Yeah,
you just get the impression they spent loads of time discussing it, and then they're just like, you know what, we're just gonna fucking carry on as if nothing happened.
Yeah, ignore the last part of the last film, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But he does escape. He claims to be, he uses Dr. Phillips's badge and escapes. He's one of the bodies to get out, and is left. So at the end of the end of 2003, Herbert West is out in the world doing whatever he is to do. There is no other follow up, but overall, like in the three, before we move on to sort of From Beyond, then so if you were to order them, rank them in order, then the Reanimator films, what order would you put them in?
I think it's fairly easy for me. Yeah. I think I'd be in reverse order. So the original I just thought was, something quite different. I did have some nostalgic memories of it as well. So that often helps give it a bit of a bounce. But trying to look at it objectively, I do think that it just is better. It was bringing something new. They were trying some stuff out. Some of the effects were great. What sticks in my mind is like the cat, when they bring the cat back for the second time, and you see how painful this thing looks as it's kind of shaking and the way West is just absolutely hamming it up, or rather it's Jeffrey Combs, isn't it? Hamming it up as West. I think he was just on top form there. I do think the second one wasn't as good, but I appreciated them pushing the boundaries, like say with these different creations that he was making up, just did something different. So they didn't try and just do exactly the same thing and end up in the same place. So I do quite like the second one as well. But this third one, it does just feel like a rehash of the first one. And like you say, only thing's different, really. He gets away at the end. You get the severed head, don't you? That's alive of the girl. And so before the rat fighting the penis.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3 for me.
Yeah, I agree totally. There's definitely diminishing returns. I think the first one in particular is an underrated 80s sort of like horror classic. I think it's sort of, it went under the radar. I think there was a lot going on in 85, and it should be revisited and remembered more, I think, because it's a really good film. I like the second one. There's good stuff in the second one. There's some really good moments. There's some really funny moments. Again, like the dog with a big meaty forearm instead of a leg. Yeah, they're sort of shake hands. There's some great little moments in that film that I'm like, oh, that's ace. And it's him when Bride pulls her own heart out and then she sort of disassembles. I mean, that is a fantastic shot. But then, like you say, when you get to the third one, it just feels lesser. It's that thing of like, there's some good moments in it, but it generally feels lesser. I think sort of like the steam has gone out of it. Like if they were to revisit this, I'd want them to sort of we do have a lot of like Lego sequels. They have these things of bringing character. Jeffrey Combs is still working. old man West, sort of have something like the final Herbert West story.
Yeah.
I don't know, sort of like an Island of Dr. Moreau kind of thing, where they come across an island and find he's done all this stuff. There's ways of doing it. I think it'd be interesting to see if they could do it. Island of Reanimator or something like that.
I'd watch it.
Yeah, I think if you could really go for it and have it like an Island of Dr. Moreau kind of tale, someone comes across the island and finds all these sort of like weirdly reanimated sort of like body parts hopping around a forest.
Oh, it could be like Jurassic Park, and they
God,
figure out how to recreate.
Yes, yeah, that'd be like
life finds a way.
You could even have him dressed like John Hammond. Oh man, I'm so yeah.
I saw yesterday. Someone had posted a picture. It was just on the London Tube or something.
I think I've seen this.
Have you seen it? Yeah, the guy. It's just like he's had a tough day at Jurassic Park.
Yeah. It's a great meme. Yeah, like John Hammond sat on the tube looking dejected.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, I think but yeah, I do really like the Reanimator films. I do think there's possibly one more to make there. But anyway, we're going to go back. We're jumping to a different sort of universe, but it's again Stuart Gordon directed, back to 1986, so the year after Reanimator, and this was to follow up. So this was the direct follow up to Reanimator. Brian Usner was producing, Stuart Gordon directing, starring Jeffrey Combs as Dr. Tillinghast, and Barbara Crampton is back as, I forget the name, as another scientist. And then we have other characters sort of you might recognize from things like, I'm terrible for names, but the big black guy from the 70s Dawn of the Dead. But the story here is that Tillinghast and Dr. Pretorius are working on a machine called the ReAnimator. And what this does is sort of it resonates your pineal gland in your brain, which allows you to see creatures that exist at a different frequency to us. So they're always all around us, but we exist at a different frequency, so we don't know they're there. They pass through us and sort of stuff. They can't see us, we can't see them. But within the sort of like the resonance of this machine, you can see them and they can see you. And one night when experimenting, they make it work. And Pretorius takes it too far, ramps it up, and he is attacked by something that is beyond our realm of understanding and killed. And Jeffrey Combs as Tillinghast escapes, but is taken into an institution. And as he retells the story of what has happened, Barbara Crampton's character sort of convinces them to be able to go back to this house and investigate the resonator. And it all goes pear-shaped from there, basically. So From Beyond, before we get into the scenes again, sort of, what were your general overall thoughts of From Beyond?
So I'd never seen this one, but I do remember that VHS cover. It's quite iconic.
The face with the sort of the
yeah. So where you've got Pretorius or whatever his name is, kind of coming out there. So I wasn't really sure what I was letting myself in for here. So started it off, and it does start off quite quickly, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Tillinghast getting bitten by these kind of floating eels kind of thing. You're like, what the hell is going on? And then as soon as Pretorius turns up, you're like, yeah, you're the baddie. yeah.
There's no preconceived notions of like him actually being good. Like
there was no heel turn, was there? It was just
This is a Bond villain literally walking on set and being like, that's right, I'm the evil one.
Yeah, but I think what I found interesting as the story went on, that Coombs, it's a very in some ways it's kind of a similar movie to ReAnimator, isn't it? But Coombs is not playing this over the top, hammed up mad scientist. He's kind of the victim in this, really. It doesn't go for him very well at all. And you kind of have Barbara Crampton, who's very much the victim in ReAnimator, and she's almost pushing things along. It's almost like they've swapped roles.
Yeah, it's her ambition, isn't it, that seems to be driving it.
Yeah, whereas in ReAnimator, it's obviously Jeffrey Combs' character who's driving it forward. So Yeah, again, very questionable. Some of the things that are going on here. He's Pretorius. He's a proper deviant, isn't he? And
Yeah,
almost got this kind of Hellraiser vibe. In
I'm
terms of
so glad you said that.
some of
Because
the naughty stuff he's up to, like and he's just trying to push the boundaries of his various senses and whatever. I think that's what made me think Hellraiser.
yeah, well, there's an actual line, isn't there? There's because you see the room and he's got all the bondage gear and all that sort of stuff, and he's obviously into that kind of thing. And you find out later on that he's impotent, so it's sort of like it's a big, he needs to get to that level to get aroused. But Tillinghast actually drops a line and says he lived his life with extending all five senses, and that was not enough. He was looking,
that was it. Yeah,
looking to extend. And I thought the same. I was like, 2 years later we get Hellraiser, but I mean, the Hellbound Heart comes out I think in '86,
right?
So, I'm not saying a copy, but like there was definitely that sort of feel of wanting to push the boundaries a little bit further in sort of those physical boundaries of pleasure and pain and all that kind of stuff is in there. The other thing for me that I felt that not copied it, but like this had a feel. I had a really weird at one point like a Stranger Things vibe going on.
All right.
When they go into this we'll get into, but they go into the basement at one point. The resonator's been turned on. It's switched. It's now sort of like generating its own power, so it needs to be switched off at the main breaker. And they go into the basement. And there's that massive worm thing. But it's the whole setup of its face, the way it's sort of split into four things, all the teeth. I was like, that looks like the Gorgon from the first series.
Right, okay.
And this whole idea of like From Beyond, this idea of sort of the upside down and this thing of like different different frequencies.
Oh yeah, I hadn't made that connection, to be honest, but it seems obvious now that you say it out loud.
So I'm not saying that sort of like Stranger Things is sort of will ever go to this point, because that's too weird to think of. But some of the design elements I was quite I was like, oh okay, you must have watched this. Like I'm sure you watched this. But yeah, I think one of you said about it going certain places. One of the things we sort of mentioned about the sexual violence in the ReAnimator series. And they've obviously given sort of like the Barbara Crampton's character a bit more agency in this. But one of the things they drop in, like again, we need to be really clear about this. H.P. Lovecraft was not asexual, like he wasn't sort of like reproducing like a cell, but like he had a wife, he was married for a short time, but he was not a sexualized person. Like it's never in his stories. Like none of his stories have sort of like all of a sudden sort of like, and now we're into the kinky bit. Like there's none of that really in there. But even in this, they introduce the resonator, and all of a sudden they're like, and the the pineal gland being sort of teased and sort of whatever in this resonation, it arouses you, and even says sort of like, you're just like, hang on.
Yeah,
it's just an excuse so for later on Barbara Crampton gets into bondage gear. And so, as a kid, when I watched this, like when I was as a kid, sort of watching, I remember seeing this on VHS. You are like, it is there for titillation, because you're like, look at that, like, boobs. It's all, because she is beautiful and she looks amazing. But you watch it now and you're just sort of like, oh right, you put it in there for that purpose.
Yeah,
and it sort of, it never seems to. It doesn't like have a payoff. Do you know what I mean? So the fact that it makes you randy doesn't seem to have any sort of payoff in the story, like at all down the line.
Sure, teenage boys in 1986 would disagree with you.
Yeah, there was payoff all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just feels like it's there for titillation only. I mean, it does sort of have this sort of thing of Pretorius, as you sort of see him over time, sort of he that's what he wants, this idea of sensual experience. But it feels a bit like shoehorned in, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, and I couldn't really, I think you just have to go with it, don't you? Because initially when they've hit this resonant frequency and these monster type things have met on our plane, if you like, it twists his head off.
Yeah.
I like the little effect on the, the chalk, the outline of the body, because you've got a little stump where his neck is. But then when he appears, and again, it's like he descends to this monster, but he first appears, he seems to be there, but he's still creepy as fuck, and you're like, well, you weren't quite this creepy when you were alive. So as going over to the other side, has that made you even more creepy?
I think, yeah, it sort of fulfilled his. He's almost become like a Cenobite, hasn't he? That, if you want to take that sort of Hellraiser thing, like it has fulfilled this idea of pleasure and pain and sensuality.
Yeah,
because he says, like, because again, there's that line they say, are you all right? Are you? Because you basically your head's back, like you look okay, and they're confused by that. And he says, please go ahead and touch me. I shall prove that I am who I am. And Coombs does reach out, and when he pushes him, like his fingers sort of merge into him a little bit.
Such a good effect, and you could almost feel it, couldn't you? When his fingers sunk into him, it's like, wow.
It's brilliantly done. But then he actually says that, and he is repulsed and steps back, and that's when Pretorius sort of says, like, well, the body is sort of, in this realm, it's sort of, I've appeared to you in this way because I wanted you to see basically something that you would recognize. And then he peels off his face, and his face explodes into like a Beetlejuice effect, and then it basically erupts. And I love that it's sort of like it had a feeling of like The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing and that sort of thing. But the effects are really good. Like I'm really like all these practical effects. No CGI in this. This is all practical. It's all just goo and latex. I think look fantastic.
I think the only animation, if you like, obviously it's not CGI, is it? But you've got the floating eels. Like when they're off in the distance, then that's clearly like an animation. But then when it's biting someone's face, you've got some guy obviously just off camera.
Stick.
But I agree. I think the practical stuff, particularly with Pretorius, when he's sort of morphing into this more and more grotesque thing, I think it's absolutely brilliantly done.
Well, the thing is, what I like about this film is it has outlandish special effects, like when Pretorius erupts, and then when he returns, like each time they go back into that resonating field, like he comes back and he's slightly more twisted, until you get the climax, or sort of like semi-climax, where he's all sort of messed up and stuff. But then you do sort of get some more subtle special effects as well, all getting practical, like the pineal gland becomes like a little stalk, like a tentacle.
It's like a third eye, isn't it?
Yeah. But the first time that you sort of, eventually it sort of like pops out, like you see it pops out, and whenever the resonator's on, they all sort of reach for their forehead and they'll rub their forehead and stuff. And there's a great little shot that when Barbara Crampton's character goes back up to set it going again, and she's like, I must feel more, I must know more. When it wakes up Jeffrey Combs, Tillinghast, before he wakes up, the thing that wakes him up is you see there's like a little bulge on his forehead. Like it pulses. And I was just like, I'd never noticed that before. I was like, I love that. That's a great little sort of subtle effect. So that sort of is telling you that his body is sensing the resonating field. And there's a couple of little things like that I think just are really cool. But yeah, it's just one of those films, again, like I said, the story almost sort of is there to sort of fulfill that we want to do special effects and we want to do these things. And so the sort of like the story sort of that allows them to do that, really.
It's kind of it's a back of a cigarette packet story, really, isn't it? It's an idea about this thing about other beings living slightly out of phase with our existence. You know, you could see that is the germ of the idea. And then you get the special effects guys, and it's like, oh, we could create this and we could create that. And so it is like a bit of a special effects showcase as well, I think, at the time.
Yeah, I mean, to highlight, I should say that the Lovecraft short stories, I think, is less than 10 pages long.
Right. That makes sense.
And basically covers the opening of the film.
Right.
That opening of the film with Tillinghast and Pretorius, and then one of them smashing up the Tillinghast smashing up and trying to escape from the that is the short story.
Right.
And then so everything else beyond that of them returning and stuff is all added in. Is all additional material. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. This film, you don't watch this, I think, for the plotting. I think that's the point, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
Much like with the Reanimator, they're going for the gore and for the splatter,
Mm.
and it works well. I mean, there's some confusing moments. I'm a little confused as to why Tillinghast is bald after he's been attacked by the worm thing in the basement.
Wasn't he swallowed?
Yeah, he's basically sort of like swallowed, but like when he comes out, like he's bruised and stuff, like he's completely hairless.
He basically sucked all the hair off him.
Yeah.
I just assumed, I didn't put too much thought into it, but because they needed the kind of eye thing to pop out, I just figured it was the easiest way to get the mechanics on his head and like keep it semi-concealed. I mean, his head is almost like the brain, isn't he? You know, so I just kind of assumed it was that.
It clearly is, but like, from a story point of view, it's sort of like all of a sudden he's hairless, and you just go, okay, all right, I'm rolling with it for now. It's fine. But again, like I say, it has some, because this is all about the great moments. I think this is where this is a film where I'll be like, oh, and that looked great, and that looked great, like rather than story. I mean, when you go back to the hospital. And they're actually sort of turning. The hospital seems to be staff seems to be pretty evil. Like before, they've been supportive, but they're going to do something to sort of the Barbara Crampton character. I don't know if they're going to cut her up or sort of give her a lobotomy or something like that to sort of calm her down. It's all very sort of, again, odd and a bit scary. But I like the fact that sort of you're saying about Coombs, Tillinghast being the victim. Like I like the fact he is like, he didn't want any of this, and it's obviously his exposure is the one that's built it up. And he's caught eating brains in the hospital, and he's sort of repulsed by his own. He's like, yeah, what am I doing? And then he attacks his friend, one of the doctors, before sort of stealing the ambulance and going back for the finale. So it all feels like, I say, that I do like the fact that, again, he's not playing the evil one. He's not sort of like, he's not the Pretorius. He's not, the Herbert West kind of character. He is sort of like, he's going back to destroy it. He wants this all sort of to end. Is kind of cool. But that ending as well, though, is going back to sort of their special effects. Because they return to, we've gone through basically sort of the middle part of the film is them staying in the house and stuff sort of, they turn on the resonator, they sort of confront Pretorius, they see different bits and pieces. They've got a police sort of support or guard. He gets attacked by like a little octopus and wrestles Jeffrey Combs in his pants, like, and attacks that worm thing. Which I'm sure he sort of turned up on set and was just like, I've been working out.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, cool. He's like, I'm doing this one in my pants. And they've just gone, all right, yeah, fine. You could do it in shorts if you want. No. I've been really working hard.
Yeah.
All right. You then obviously get the scene where sort of Barbara Crampton, having affected, like dons the what's it?
Basque.
The bondage wear and all that sort of, basically attempts to sort of rape Tillinghast.
I wasn't sure if she actually started to.
Basically looked like it, yeah.
Yeah.
Because and the copper walked in, like, what are you doing? And so and that's when they end up going back to the hospital, because it's all going. Basically, it reactivates, and then they have to escape. And they get attacked. This is the thing about some of the special effects. So the guy who plays, I'm going to find his name because I need to tell it. The guy who plays the policeman,
Ken Forby.
Forby.
Forey.
Foray, that's right, Ken Foray. The machine, the resonator, sort of activates again. The electricity is jumping from wire to sort of circuit breaker, and they get attacked by like a swarm of insects.
Best movie death.
Yeah, he literally gets eaten, and you see like he's almost like still alive, but his arms are like just bone and goo, and his chest cavity's all been eaten away and stuff. It looks great. Yeah. So I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's another one where I was like, again, like another one of those moments being like, that's really a really cool moment.
Yeah, and I like it as well, just because of I almost like it when you can see the strings,
Yes.
the fact that they've left his head completely alone. So, it's just the actor's head stuck through a hole in the floor, and then they've got this ridiculous little skeleton that's still somehow able to move, even though there's no muscle or ligaments left. I just thought it looked great, and again, it gives me that nostalgia for this type of movie where, like I say, you can see exactly how they've done it. But fair play to him anyway. I thought it was, for me, the best movie death.
Oh, it's amazing. It's fantastic. One of the things I would say is this is the thing with sort of like, Blu-rays and 4K. Some of these films don't benefit from, you need them to be that little bit murky. Like there's a reason they work best on VHS, because those special effects were sort of hidden in poor quality VHS. And so when you do sort of get them in ultra high definition or HD or whatever, so there are moments when you can sort of see the strings, and sometimes it takes away. But not in this film. I never feel like that in this film. I feel like all the practical effects work, and they work enough that, like you say, I know this is Ken Foray's head sort of popped through a floor, but it's working enough for me to be like, yeah, I'm buying that. That's fine. I'm happy with that in this film.
Yeah.
Because that goes to the end of the film, so they do return to back to the house with the resonator. It's sort of the resonator's been activated, and Pretorius is now this mass, and he basically consumes Tillinghast, and then you get these that basically sort of becomes a really sort of confusing bit of a mess again. But like Tillinghast then erupts from Pretorius, like literally, and starts to rip the flesh off it. And at one point, like Pretorius's skull is attacking, is attacking Tillinghast. Like it becomes a bit of a mess up, but you're not entirely sure what's going on. But it looks great.
Yeah.
And so they have this thing, and then eventually, sort of, Barbara Crampton. I've just been checking. It's McMichaels. Dr. McMichaels sort of like attacks. She attacks the resonator, and sort of it breaks and it's about to explode. And she escapes out of the building. And it's sort of that full circle, isn't it? Like it's taking you back to the beginning of the film. You get the woman. There's a neighbor who's complaining about the noises from the house, and her little dog Bunny. And then you have that moment where sort of like Barbara Crampton sort of like has a busted up her knee and stuff, but she goes hysterical, doesn't she? Basically, sort of like falls into hysterical laughter. But so, what are your thoughts on that whole finale? They return back to the hotel, to the route, to the house, and it all goes gooey.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, the best parts of the movie have already been by the time you get to that climax, if you like. I think all of the stuff leading up to it was quite interesting. Just the idea, some of the effects, like say the way Bill Foray had died off, I thought was great. And then when it got to the end, I found myself just a little bit bored by it. I was ready for it to be over. Whereas, like, for the ReAnimator movies and stuff, the climax, the last act really is, quite memorable. And I thought it was a nice touch for her to basically go a bit mad scientist right at the end. And I was reading that, the studio execs didn't really want her for the role, and it was Stuart Gordon who really pushed for it. And they were saying, she's too young to pass off as like a psychologist. And so fair play to Stuart Gordon, but she's not there for her age, is she? You
No,
know?
yeah, yeah. I'm assuming when he was, the pushback was like, she's not, she's too young to play this character. And he's like, have you seen what she's going to be wearing in this film?
So apparently she sold that dominatrix outfit just at a yard sale.
Oh, really?
So it's probably in someone's basement or something floating about there somewhere, but
yeah, interesting to know where that's gone. But yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that, because obviously this is 86 and ReAnimator is 85, and in 1985 she's playing an undergrad student, and then in 86 she's playing a sort of like a fully fledged psychologist. I mean, that's what actors do, and they can sort of play an age range. I think she's fine. I think it's she looks a bit young for it, but it's not distractingly so.
Yeah, and I think because you've got her and Coombs together, it does give it this almost grindhouse sort of feel, doesn't it? Where you've got the same actors playing these different characters in these completely different movies. So I'm glad you chose this, but it's really because of those two, isn't it? And it makes it feel like it's almost tangential to the ReAnimator universe.
Yeah, it's like of a piece, isn't it? It sort of feels like it fits within this this sort of trilogy. This is there's almost like a Lovecraft. There's a gooey Lovecraft sort of box set, and it's part of that, really. But I think they're both pretty good in it. Again, this is that thing of, like, as I often say, like, they got the assignment, like they sort of know what this is, and I think so does Stuart Gordon, so they work well as a team.
But I was reading up. Apparently, the production ran out of money before they actually finished off the finale. So I know I was just looking as we were talking there. So I don't know if that's got something to do. I don't know how you feel about that finale, but for me, it just all felt a bit flat.
Yeah,
and actually, if they ran out of money, that would sort of explain it.
I think the one thing that seems obvious, and now you say that, and it makes it even more obvious, is a lot of the finale is like extreme close-ups of goo and like and of those sort of things, of like telling us sort of like escaping Pretorius, and then the Scott, the body bit sort of fighting.
Yeah,
it's all very close up, which tells me it could be shot anywhere. So they've got the lighting right, and they've probably filmed that. So it could well be that, well, we've run out of money, we're gonna have to do this a little bit. We can't have like a mid shot or a wide shot showing this thing going on. And so you're right, it does. It feels very sort of rushed towards the end. But the thing is, I say you completely right as well. For me, the finale is fine, but it's not even the peak of the film. I think the peak of the film is whilst they're in the house. That sort of like the second act is the best part. I think once they go to the hospital, it's sort of okay. But that third act, from sort of the hospital and back to the house, sort of it's all okay. But that midsection is definitely my favourite part of the film.
Yeah, and that's where it gets. Pretorius gets his creepiest, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He gets creepier and creepier, and there's another scene where you kind of see he's got all his fingers are growing in front of your eyes, and he's saying, "If I was alive, I'd enjoy you in other ways." You creepy old bastard.
Yeah.
So definitely, I'd agree with that. That the middle kind of third of it is definitely the best bit.
The thing is, I think I've got to check actually, because I think it's this. There's sort of like a collection of films, I feel, from this sort of period, that are this sort of like Brian Usner and Stuart Gordon, that have this sort of, so they were going for a certain kind of like splatter horror comedy. Because you've also got, I'm just checking out, you've got Society, and if you've ever seen that, that's from 1989.
I remember that at the time. Yeah,
that's quite a good one. But the other one I was thinking about, I just wanted to double check, which is Dan O'Bannon is the director, but Return of the Living Dead, which is also 85, has a similar sort of comedy horror sensibility as ReAnimator.
Mhm.
where like there's some legit scary moments and the horror's there, but they do a lot of, they're falling into that sort of like gory horror thing as well. So there's almost just like you got the Brat Pack. I think these guys like the Splat Pack. This is the mid-80s sort of gore hounds, and there's that sort of like collection of films. But these ones I think stand out. I think forgetting Bride and beyond Reanimator, I think if you were to take those mid-80s sort of films, mid to late 80s, there's a series of really good splatter sort of like horror comedies I think would be worth revisiting as a sort of a genre in and of itself.
Yeah, so I said at the top of the show, didn't I, that about watching all these different questionable movies.
Yeah.
But we also did a couple of weeks ago, Tales from the Crypt, Bordello of Blood.
Yeah.
And it's almost the same DNA as this. I don't think it's the same caliber as say the first Reanimator, but it's the same kind of horror comedy. Plenty of women in basques and things,
Yeah, well,
it's just
I almost felt that was almost like I think that was probably like the memo that went out when they created the TV show, the sort of Tales from the Crypt, was like, right, because it's an early HBO, wasn't it? So it would probably be like, right, boobs and horror, have some fun. You've got the Crypt Keeper. Bordello of Blood's good. If you want to get, I think Demon Knight, which is the other one they did, is actually slightly better. But they're both pretty good fun.
It was a Patreon pick, and they did say that Demon Knight was better, but that's not why they made us watch it.
if anything, they were like, Demon Knight's better. That's why you're not watching that one.
Yeah, that's why you're watching the other one.
Yeah, it's a fair shout. I can understand that.
Yeah.
But this is definitely that sort of. There's definitely a genre of this, isn't there? The sort of splatter, sort of comedy horror, and I love them. I do think they're really good fun. But anyway, so final thoughts on From Beyond.
So I did enjoy this one as well. I think it's very different. I mean, that kind of idea about other life forms existing slightly out of phase with this one. I've seen other things, other movies since. What is the game? There's a game that the name's lost on me now, but again, just that idea that people are there, and so I quite like the idea, and the effects for the time were just absolutely brilliant, and that's the thing that makes you go back and kind of rewatch it. Like you say, like we've said, the kind of middle third, that's the best bit, and then the finale does tail off a bit for me. But no, again, I enjoyed this one, and it was just different, and some fresh ideas, some good deaths, and glad I've watched this one now.
Yeah, add it to your add it to those list of things that Chris is probably never going to watch.
No, you won't watch this one.
Right. But thank you very much for coming on and doing this retrospective. It's been great to go back and do these films. I think I've really enjoyed them, and every single one of these, regardless of sort of, we've talked about the quality of them, but I think they've all got something. They've got moments where I'm like, oh, that's cool, or like that's fun, that looks good. So I think each one of them has something to offer, and I think from my, or at least from my point of view, I think that at least like Reanimator, From Beyond, I will watch again, and sort of like they'll be in my rotation of sort of and I'd recommend them if someone was asking for this kind of thing at Halloween. I'm looking for something. I think these could be quite good fun Halloween sort of like October movies. So I'll definitely recommend them at that sort of point.
So what order would you put all four in?
Oh, I think it really goes in order of release. I think for me, I think Reanimator is the best. From Beyond comes in sort of second. I think some, I think the special effects and besides the third act being a bit of a mess, I think it's actually really solid. Then Bride of Reanimator, a little bit down. There's Bride of Reanimator. It's mostly good. It's interesting. It's got some good bits. It gets again slightly messy, but I think the third act of that is actually really good. And then a bit of a bigger gap, and then Beyond Reanimator. What about yourself?
I think almost the same. I'd probably flip Bride of Reanimator and From Beyond around. I do appreciate. I think the gore on From Beyond is kind of ramped up a little bit more. I just love Jeffrey Combs when he's properly hamming it up, and he's just playing that Batman villain. I just love it. So, and like I say, I like the imagination. The all these different body parts glued in together in different ways. I really appreciated that. But it'd be close though. I could see why. We're almost on the same page there.
Yeah, but I think I'll be revisiting some of these just to enjoy down the line. They are good, and if guys, ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed them, if you've watched them, or if you haven't watched them and we've talked about them, we've probably spoiled an awful lot. Also, but tough. Their films are the most recent one's 20 years old, so they're out there. Go watch them. Go check them out. And let us know what you think. Come find out. Come find us at 20th Century Geek on Twitter. Come let us know, or any other social media platform. Come let us know what you think of the 4 films we've been talking about. Do you enjoy them? Do you think they're worth revisiting? And have you got any thoughts on the levels of gore and everything else that's going on? But Dave, do you want to give yourself a pop? Where can people find you, and where can people listen to you?
Well, first of all, thanks very much, Scott, for letting me come on and we talk about the second part of the quadrilogy unofficially. No, it's been really great. And to be honest, I wouldn't have gone back and watched these. And I'm not the biggest horror fan in the world. And so I'm trying to think. I wasn't scared of these, but I was trying to think, well, if I'd have watched these in the certainly the first 2 in the mid 80s, would I have found them scary? I remember watching Reanimator quite a lot. And I felt like at that time that was just about my limit, without scaring the crap out of me. So it's been great to go back and watch. So you can get me at the VHS Strikes Back podcast. You can also get me at Comics in Motion, Chris and Dave's Reality TV cast, or Back to the Office, whichever one. There must be something that tickles your fancy in that lot.
Yeah, you got something on there. And the links down for Comics in Motion is down below. Comics in Motion in particular is an absolute sort of smorgasbord of pop culture and sort of geek culture goodness. There's a podcast I think is every day now. I think it's 7 days a week now, so get something, isn't it?
We've got enough shows to fill that up, but with life happening, I would say we probably get about 3 out a week. But loads of different shows. We've got classic comics discussions, TV, movies. We do indie comics. Mike is so consistent with the Star Wars comics. It's just, again, it's just, for me, it's just a fun place for us to be as just creators. We love what we do, and then just flip on the record button every now and then.
Yeah, every now and then, all the time. Yeah. But ladies, do go check out Comics in Motion, all those sort of podcast platforms. But if you're liking what we're doing, if you've enjoyed this conversation, go back and check all our other conversations, all those other discussions I've had for short stories and comics, Desert Island comics, and so many of the retrospectives. This is just the sort of the ReAnimator retrospective, but we've done RoboCop, we've done Rocky, we've done, and that's just the R's. I've done Predator, I've done Terminator, we've done all the big ones. We've done some fantastic retrospectives. Go back and check them out. And if you like them, leave a review, leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform. And more than that, if you really like what we're doing, go and check out our Patreon. It's there out there. So www.patreon.com/20, that's 20CG Media. And there'll be a link down below. But there's all kinds of stuff on there, absolute hours and hours of the podcast material that we are putting out, which is all good fun. But as usual, Dave, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been a great chance to catch up and talk splatter horror.
Thank you very much, sir.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And we shall talk again soon.